Axios ran a story on how getting the water out of the hydrants in Pacific Palisades was more complicated than it seems. I'm sure it's very complicated. That's why I pay 13% of my income in the state every year to people who I assumed were working on things like this. You know what the absolute worst thing for the environment is? Wildfires. A 22 study found that the smoke from just the two in 2020 wiped out 18 years of carbon reduction in the state, which means we suffered the pain of driving those early model Priuses for nothing. California is the place that spends money and gets nothing, which is why you may have noticed when the fires broke out, no one escaped by high-speed.
That's a high-profile liberal pundit suddenly sounding like a taxpayer revolt in human form, torching California's leadership for turning paradise into a playground for the rich and miserable. What began as a mild discussion on wildfires quickly turned into a televised takedown of bureaucratic rot. You don't often see someone from the left calling out their own team for burning through billions while pretending to fix the problem. But here it is, a rare spark of honesty in a state smothered by smoke and nonsense.
Yes, undeniably true that LA is built in a stupid place to build a city. When asked why so many of the hydrants in the Palisades ran out of water, Governor Newsom said the local folks are trying to figure that out. Yeah, you gotta do that before the fire. I've heard people say, do you want to pay more taxes to fund this? No. I want you to use the exorbitant taxes you already collect to prioritize it. We have the highest marginal tax rate in America, higher than almost all other states, and soon Greenland. What is included for that? Breadsticks? Because it clearly doesn't cover fire. That's government's job. Protect us from crime, violence, theft, fire. At least in the Palisades, the hydrants were still there. 300 other ones around the city are just gone, stolen for parts. One of the 3 reservoirs for the Palisades was offline at the one time of year when it was most needed. LA's Mayor Karen Bass, the Nero of American politics, was fiddling in Ghana while the city burned and later placed the blame on 8 months of negligible rain and winds that have not been seen in LA in at least 14 years. Yeah, that's not that long a time. Maybe look in the history books to see how our ancestors handled it back in 2011.
The punchline. The same voters who demanded layers of red tape are now choking on it. California's chaos didn't arrive overnight. It's been marinating in mismanagement for decades. From inflated budgets to laughable energy policies, every solution created 3 new problems. Anyone still insisting this is some isolated hiccup clearly hasn't looked outside their overpriced apartment window lately.
The good news is our fire chief is a lesbian. Am I against a lesbian being chief? Of course not. Do I think a lesbian can do the job? Of course I do. And maybe she's the best person for the job. Or maybe they really wanted a lesbian in that job, and she's just the best lesbian for the job, and with essential services, that's not good enough. Crowley's official bio says Chief Crowley leads a diverse department, creating, supporting, and promoting a culture that values diversity, inclusion, and equity while striving to meet and exceed the expectations of the communities. Well, you didn't exceed my expectations, which was that the whole city wouldn't burn down. But it's telling that diversity is mentioned twice before we get to while striving to meet expectations. Now, can you do 2 things at once? Yes, but it matters where your head is. Deputy Chief Kristen Larson said this, which would sound kind of racist if a Southern sheriff said it. Who teaches people this bullshit? No one cares what someone looks like when they're pulling you out of a burning house. Larson also seems to believe that if a female firefighter can't pick up a man, it's his fault. She said, he got himself into the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
And right on cue, the outrage industrial complex hit DEFCON 1. Apparently, expecting your government to function isn't inclusive anymore. The same people who claim to love diversity can't stand a diverse opinion. The second someone breaks from the script, they're labeled dangerous, divisive, or worse, Republican. It's not debate they want. It's obedience dressed up as virtue.
Because who pays the highest price when politicians don't prioritize basic services? The first responders, our heroes, who every time go above and beyond because they have to, because we leave it all to them. Now, is wokeness the main reason for the fires? Of course not. But it's also not wrong to associate some of the unforced errors our government made with the things normies see as hallmarks of uber-progressive politics: questionable budget priorities, high taxes that get you nothing, making everything about identity politics, virtue signaling overseas instead of tending to the nuts and bolts at home. Cali has no shortage of safety commissions and agencies and bureaucrats and regulators, and of course, sign language interpreters who communicate with their face. Common sense? We better get some of that back soon, because wildfires in California are like boob jobs in a strip club. Inevitable, and they're only going to get bigger.
Here's the bitter truth. Progressivism stopped progressing a long time ago. It's now a circular protest movement that feeds on its own failures. Voters are no longer asking for reform. They're wondering if reform is even possible inside a system this rotten. Maybe the next great political movement won't come from the left or right, but from the millions caught in between, tired of paying for everyone else's delusions. Because patience, like California's forests, is running out.